Today we honor Sanford Porter and his family. Sanford Porter would never allow his picture to be taken. It is vanity, he said. Sanford continues his autobiography prior to his marriage in 1812.
While I was so engaged, one of our neighbors by the name of Edward Gilmore came over looking for a man to put in his hay. It looked as though there was a storm brewing, and his hay being a coarse kind, clover leaf and timothy, it would soon soak through and become ruined. He said if he could get a man for one day, he'd give him $1 in silver money. I said, well, I came home for a rest after a hard summer's work, but you seem to need help, and I guess one more day's work won't hurt me, so I'll come. All right, said he, come early before breakfast. I have another man coming with a team, and another to help load and mow away, and Nicholas will help you. I had long been acquainted with this Gilmore family, and knew them to be a very nice sort of people. They were a generous and liberal family, and morally clean and good. I was on the job early next morning, all prepared for work, had breakfast at home, and there we waited and waited for the other men to come, and me and Mr. Gilmore got to fretting around till come 10 o'clock, and still no one showed up. Mr. Gilmore got entirely out of patience. The clouds were looking more and more black and heavy. Then said I, Mr. Gilmore, don't fret yourself. Your hay will all be in the barn before dark. If Nicholas will load and mow away, oh, that would be an impossibility unless that man gets here with his team. Well, Nicholas, get along with your team, and we will see what we shall see, said I. When we got out in the meadow, I said to Nicholas, now we must put on every spare we think our oxen can haul. Make your load as big as you think you can get in the barn with. Mr. Gilmore watched us, and when we got in, he was out there with a fine liquor concoction that braced us up for another try. And every time we came in thereafter, he was out there with a good drink and all kinds of dainties to eat. I said to him, we do not stop to sit down to eat until all this hay is in the mow. So he said to his wife, keep flowing bowls and the best you can make for them to eat. Sanford is as wet as though he had been dipped in the river. When we got in with the last load, it was rather darkish in the barn, and I told Nicholas to get on the mow. He said he could not do it, for he was almost tired to death. Then Mr. Gilmore pled with me to leave it on the wagon until morning. No, it must be in before dark. I told you it should be safe in the barn before dark, and I won't be entirely satisfied until it is where I said it should be. I must throw it off the wagon, and if Nicholas cannot move it away, it will have to stay where I put it. So at it I went, and it was not really dark when I threw my last fork. I had pitched on and off 9 loads, and they were loads. He had agreed to pay me $1 a day, but he handed me $2, saying, if you want more, you can have it. No, Mr. Gilmore, I want only that which was agreed upon. I was not thinking of the wage, only of getting that hay in. Back at Major Mann's, Sanford repaired some old fencing. The old Major was buying up fat cattle to take to market. He bought up about 160 head and hired old Captain Newell to take them to Boston to market. He wanted me to go and help drive the drove of cattle. He said he would furnish me with a good horse and let my wages go on the same as if I was at work. I told him I would go and help in the drive. We drove very slow, for the cattle were fat and the weather warm. My horse had to do all the running, for the old captain was fat and fussy and would follow behind in the road and would not turn much to the right or left. But he was of a good disposition. I believe the worst fault he had was he drank too much. He would urge me to drink with him almost every time he drank, but I would not drink his rum or brandy unless I had water to weaken it. But to please him, I would put it to my mouth and make him think that I had taken a drink. We got along with our drive very well, but slow. We left our drive in Charleston, opposite of Boston. The captain and I went across the bridge to the city. I stayed a day or two and had to go back on foot and alone. The captain gave me money to bear my expenses. I started very early in the morning. I went on until I got rather faint and hungry, and I stopped at a tavern and called for my breakfast.
They soon got what they called my breakfast. She got a chair and sat down at the table. She sat right at the head of the table, nearly opposite me. She was dressed so fine and was so genteel that she fairly scared me. I was filled so full I could scarcely swallow. I drank 1 cup of coffee and ate a little and got up from the table. She was a fine lady at the head of the table. I ate what there was, and I told her to fetch me more. She appeared to be mad and looked cross. I said, "What made you look so cross? Don't be afraid." I told her what to bring, and she went and brought me some more and sat down at the head of the table. I said to her, "I'm looking about to see if I can find a woman that suits me for a wife, and I like your looks. Are you a married woman?" "No," she spoke short and cross. "I make a short courtship. Will you marry me?" No, she didn't want to marry anybody. "Well, madam, I want some more victuals brought on. I haven't eaten half enough yet." I told her what I wanted her to bring of different sorts. I told her I lived in the back country. She brought on some more and sat down at the table and muttered out something. I ate until I thought I had got the worth of what I had paid for. I paid her the 25 cents and bid her good-bye and went on. I never was afraid to eat after that, let who would set the table.
I went on to the old Major's. My time was up, and more too. We settled up, and I took a receipt from him in full of all demands against Father, and he paid me up what he was owing me for my work. I got home and handed Father the receipt. He said it was all right. I think it was then about the 1st of November.
The young people had a custom of having a party on Thanksgiving Day in the afternoon and night. They would have a committee of 3 or 4 young men to pick out the couples they wanted at the dance. I happened to be picked with my partner for one couple. There would be 20 or 30 couples. They had supper in the forepart of the evening. Later on at night they would hand around pies and cakes and cheese, gingerbread, sweetened liquor, such as would please the taste and cheer the feelings. It was a feast for Thanksgiving. Whether we felt thankful or not, we had to pay for it.
The nut trees were high. We had to wait until the nuts would drop off, and it would take cold, freezing weather and high winds to shake them off. Sometimes they remained on all winter, but then we would get poles and knock them off. Some of them were more like apple trees. They would climb up and shake them. Then I had to get broomsticks for Father, and also my other chores to do to prepare for the winter and to go to school. The winter's wood must not be neglected. I had shoemaking to do for ourselves and for as much as I would do for the neighbors. We got our planting done, then got to hoeing. We had to hoe all we could hoe over 2 or 3 times to keep the weeds and thistles down. We knew nothing about irrigating the crops or land in that country. I never saw it done in any of the eastern states. I never saw it done anywhere until we came to Utah. Sometime later I started for the Holland Purchase in Buffalo country, where Abner and Susanna Currier lived. I went to looking around the country to see if I could find a place that suited me to make a farm. I went up the creek from Abner's a number of miles, 2 or 3 miles beyond Uncle Dake's. I found land that was not claimed by anybody, and it lay very handsome. I took up my claim of 100 acres and stuck stakes and put my name on the stakes. I would have to walk 2 miles night and morning and live with Uncle Dake. I let them have the cow to milk. I furnished my eats, and Annie Dake cooked them for me. The milk and the butter from the cow helped pay her. I cut down and trimmed up all the timber on 6 acres of land, burned up the brush, and went to see if I could get a couple of men to help me haul the logs. I got them together with a team, and we started hauling. But we had got only one heap of logs when it began to thunder, and big black clouds began piling up in the west. "Well," they said, "we may as well quit and go home before it starts to rain, for it will likely pour for the next few days." I said, "Oh, no, you will not go home, for I have got to get these logs hauled. I have gone to a lot of trouble to get you here, and I can't afford to have you leave now. It's like this, young man. We have lived hereabouts for a good many years, and never yet seen a thunderstorm come up this way, but it poured rain for several days." I said, "Oh, it is not going to rain today, for I will not let it." "And how are you going to prevent it?" they asked. "I'll show you how I'll prevent it." And I ran and jumped upon a big stump and commanded those clouds to divide and half go south and the other half go north, and let the sun shine on us, for the work here must be done. I acted it all out with my hands and my whole body as if I was in great earnest, and I was in earnest. To our surprise, the clouds parted, and part of them rolled to the north and the rest to the south, and the thunder went with them, and the sun shone down on us. The elements had obeyed me. The men said it beat anything they had ever seen in their lives, and they looked at me as if I was some strange being that had suddenly appeared before them. I was a stranger to them, having met them but the day before. But to confess, I was as surprised at the time as they were. I believe that men could control the elements much more than they do if they would exert the powers that God gives them, if they would use aright their free agency. We all admit that God has all power in heaven and earth. He has given to every person that comes upon the earth a portion of his spirit and power, and told them how to cultivate that faith which is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Then if a man will have unshaken confidence in God and in the godlike attributes in themselves, they can command in their hour of need, and God will have respect unto them.
I concluded I must have a house and a housekeeper, for the way I had to live was too troublesome. I had agreed with a young woman in Vermont to marry her. I had written 2 or 3 times to her, but received no answer. I concluded she had given up the bargain, and thought that she would not go so far from her father and mother. I wrote a letter to that effect, and told her to marry to suit herself if she could. I could not stand in her way. I gave up the idea of going back to see her. I went looking about to see if I could find anyone I liked to keep house for me. I went down to the creek about 10 miles from Abner's to a meeting, and I got talking with a young man there and told him what my name was and where I had my claim. It was very unhandy for me to go so far night and morning to work, and I needed a woman to keep house. He said he knew of one he thought I could get, and he introduced me to her. I stayed with her that night, and she seemed very willing to marry me, wanted to know when I would come again. I told her I did not know. I had no house of my own, and I didn't know when I would get one, perhaps in a week or 2. I thought I would go and see her again. I went over to the spring, was making ready to go to the meeting and see that girl, when here came the person and handed me a letter. I opened it, and behold, it was from my sweetheart in Vermont. She wrote with so much affection that I sat down and wept freely. She wrote that she was astonished at the last letter I wrote her, that she had written 3 or 4 letters, and I had gotten none of them, that she had not changed her mind at all, and had been preparing to go there just as soon as I thought proper, and that she was willing to go to that country, and her folks were willing that she should go there. We all were very well acquainted with each other, for we had lived about a half a mile apart for about 10 to 12 years, and had been to the same school together every winter. I did not go to see Miss Polly Doane, and I heard she was very much disappointed, and was preparing to keep house for me.
After I got news from Vermont, I went to preparing to go back to see the folks. I traded off my cow and got a fine year-old mare, a very smart animal, and got a saddle and bridle, and started back. It was about 500 miles, and was thought to be quite a long journey in those days. I found them all well, and we were glad to see each other. I think it was sometime in November that I got back there. After resting a while and visiting the neighbors, we began to think of getting married.
They have a custom in those parts of announcing your intentions of marriage. They must be published 3 Sundays running before a couple could be lawfully married. The priest must get up on the stand and cry aloud, "Marriage intended between, say, John Fairbanks and Olive Fairchild. If anyone has objection to this marriage, let them make it manifest or forever hold their peace." It is called being cried off. The young couple must be there and stand up together so the whole congregation can see them. There was no one in the congregation who made any objection to me and my partner getting married, so on the morning of the first day of January, 1812, I made her mine.
We left for the Stern country sometime in February. We arrived at Uncle Dake's in good shape, but it was along in March before I could get out on my claim. I went to and from, doing what I could, and on the last day of April I took my horse and sleigh, went to the sawmill, and got a load of pitch plank, and the next morning early I went out to the place. We had been living at Abner's and Sousa's about 7 miles from my claim. The snow was about a foot deep and soft. I had made up my mind to build 1 room of my house that day. I hauled the logs and split them, laid them to the height I wanted, put on the roof, and laid the floor, and got back to Abner's before dark. When I told them what I had done, they wanted to know who helped me. Not a soul. I did it myself. Ah, go on. No man living could do it alone in any time, much less in a single day. Well, I said, I have no way of proving that I did it alone, for nobody was there, but I can prove that it is done, for tomorrow morning we are going to move in. If there was no one with you, the very devils out of hell must have helped you. I did not see them, but if they were there, I am grateful that they helped instead of hindering, as is their custom. So the next morning we moved into the house that Sanford built in 1 day. And right then the War of 1812 was declared and stopped everything. Many a home was broken up and families separated, mine among them. There came orders for so many soldiers to be raised out of the ranks of the militia company, either by their volunteering or draft. Our company was ordered to muster on such a day at such a place. Our captain got the men placed and called for so many volunteers, but there was no one who stepped out of the ranks. Our captain said he had to raise so many, and seeing that they would not volunteer, he would have to make out a draft. Our company was small. I think there were only 7 or 8 called for out of our company. He had as many tickets as there were men, and as many forms as there were soldiers called for, and put them into a hat or box and hustled them all up and thoroughly mixed them up. The men were to be lined up and walk up and take out a ticket, being careful and seeing that no man took only one and did not look at his ticket nor let anyone else see it until all had been drawn. Then we were called to come forward and show our ticket. I had drawn a blank, but there was one Arthur Humphrey, the most witty man that was in that country. He looked sly and saw that he had drawn a piece, and clapped into his mouth and chewed it up. And when we had to show there was one piece lacking, they looked and hunted carefully all about. Old Humphrey was busy and careful as anyone, and more so than the rest of us. Well, the captain said there was a mistake and we would have to draw again. The next time we drew, I drew a form and got into the army. We would not have known that it was Humphrey, but there was a little boy that saw his ticket, and when he held it between his thumb and finger and saw the mark and saw that he put it in his mouth. I have passed through many a trial in my life, but leaving my young wife, my new home, and the joy of seeing my own crops mature was about the keenest pang I ever endured. The headquarters of our army was at Black Rock, 4 miles from Buffalo City, and the harbor for boats and vessels was on Lake Erie. The people all through the country were a good deal like a swarm of bees that had been molested and robbed of their honey. They didn't know where they wanted to go or what they wanted to do. Neither did I, for I had to check out without either knapsack or blanket. We all got our guns and ammunition, and little did we know what would be our fate, life or death, which. There was a good many of our regiment who lost their lives. I came as near to losing my life as I could and live. There was a distemper that got into our army called the cold plague, that seized hundreds of our men, and the doctors had no skill that would cure it. They would be taken with it and die within 24 hours. They would go to the hospital, and I never knew or heard of one that came out alive. We soldiers got it into our heads that the doctors were traitors and wanted to kill as many as they could. I was taken with it, and our officer said I must go to the hospital. The ensign of our company came and told me what the orders were. I told him I would not go there. I had rather die out where I could have fresh air. I asked him to go to the colonel and see if he would not let me go on parole a few days. He went, and they gave me a parole of 4 days. I took and read it. Could you not get it for longer than 4 days? He said it was as long a time as I would need. I took my pack and blanket and what belonged to me and my gun and cartridge box and bid the ensign goodbye and started. I had a great pain in my head and shoulders, and in fact all over. I could not walk very far before I had to sit down and rest. I walked on 2 or 3 miles and came to a house. I told the woman that I was sick and wanted to leave my gun and wanted her man to keep it until I could come for it. I told her my name. I finally got to Abner. I got my brother-in-law, Abner, to go and get some hemlock boughs and boil them and get up some steam and keep me there till I could get up some steam. I rested well until daylight. Some of them came to see how I was, but I could not speak or stir. I could not open or shut my eyes. They rubbed my hands and arms and gave me some sweetened liquor to drink. After a while I got so I could move my head. I began to limber up, and in a few days I felt very well again. As soon as I was able, about the last of November, we moved back on our claim. I had gathered what corn, potatoes, etc. that was left, got a cow, and we fared very well that winter. But I had another streak of bad luck come early spring. The snow had melted partly off, and I wanted to make some sugar. I made some sap troughs and tapped some sugar trees and prepared a boiling place. I took fast hold of a limb, and it whirled, and the axe came down smart onto my foot and would have cut it slick off, but the lower corner of the axe struck a limb and stopped the force of the axe, and it bounced up and struck across my foot and left the lower part of the sole of my boot whole. And it seemed as if I was going to bleed to death in a short time. I caught hold of a stick and hollered and limped on as fast as I possibly could. I saw my wife come out of the house. She had heard me holler. I tried to walk toward her, but everything began to look dark, and I lay down on a big log and bid the world farewell, and I never expected to see daylight again. My wife came to me, and she got hold of my foot and held it tight together, and it stopped bleeding. I came to and saw her and thought her face was as white as a cloth. I got so I could speak and told her not to be scared. I saw my foot had stopped bleeding. She ran to the house to get a cloth to bind up my foot. I took my stick and followed after. I held up my foot so as to keep it together as much as I could. I got to the house just as she was coming out. We went into the house. She spread out a quilt and some other things, and I lay down. She lay the little child, Chauncey Warner, their first child, by my side. The child was sleeping. She started to go to Uncle Dake's to get him to come and fix my foot and put it together so as to have it grow together right. It was 2 miles from our house to Uncle Dake's. I lay there very still for fear if I stirred much, my foot would start to bleeding. The child lay still, and I was thinking, well, she has just about got there. She opened our door and came in. Said I to her, "Who did you meet?" She didn't meet anybody. Well, why didn't you go there? She said she had been there. What, to Uncle Dake's? Yes, said I. You haven't, for it is not possible. She said it was possible, and Uncle and Aunt Dake were coming in all the slop and slush. Yes, said I, your clothes don't look much wet, nor shoes nor stockings. She pulled off her shoes, and there was but a little water in them. Why don't you pull off your stockings and wring the water out? She said there was none that would wring out. In about half an hour, Uncle and Aunt Dake came. They had on boots, both of them, that came nearly to their knees, and as full of water as they could and have them walk. Their clothes were dripping wet. Why, said I, Nancy's clothes, shoes, or stockings don't appear very much wet. No, because she flew. They knew she flew because they saw her start from them, and her feet did not touch the water. They called to her to stop, but she paid no attention, but kept on flying, and soon was out of their sight. Her clothes were not muddy like theirs. This was a mystery to all of us. We could not solve or comprehend it, try as we would. To go 4 miles through slop and slush, mud and water, almost knee-deep, and come home dry. It was beyond the bounds of human reason and partook of the supernatural. It has been said that there is no effect without a cause, but there have been great effects take place in this world without any natural cause. It was no natural cause that caught up the city of Enoch. No natural cause for Noah's flood. No natural cause for the sea to divide and let the Israelites through dry shod. No natural cause for the sun to stand still for Joshua. No natural cause for Elijah's translation. No natural cause for Paul's conversion. Why not supernatural things now, if there was a crying need as well as in times past? God is the same unchangeable being now as he was then. Mankind is blessed with the same godlike attributes now as then. We have the same privileges, the same claim on the higher powers, but without faith coupled with works, there never was and never will be anything done. And a timid spirit with an easygoing disposition is not one which can work miracles. A person must have a strong determination, be exceedingly anxious, exert all the powers he possesses with never a doubt but what he can accomplish it. Do not fear. Uncle Dake set my foot very straight and bound it up nicely. I was surprised how little pain I suffered with it. I had to get around and do some things. My wife could not look after the stock or cut wood, etc. I got all my land planted into corn, potatoes, beans, oats, etc. And that fall I had a lovely crop of everything. Indeed, it looked as though we should be well provided for another year.
But on the 6th of October there came a fierce snowstorm, which did not quit until the snow was 2 feet deep. It was wet and heavy, and it lodged on the trees and broke off great limbs and branches and crushed the bushes. Things were crashing all around us, every which way. Then after this the sun came out, bright and beautiful, smiling as if nothing had happened, and the snow soon melted, with all the results that my corn and oats and potatoes lay flat on the ground in a foot of water. It could not grain off, for the ground was too level. Before it could dry out, winter would be upon us, and my oats that were to feed my cattle lay flat on the ground. It was a terrible, dismal sight. I stood there trying to contrive a plan, and an idea hit me. There was a part of my land where the stumps had not been removed. They were quite high and close together. I decided to get poles and lay them from one stump to another, and take my scythe and reap up the oats and bind them close to the cuts, and hang them across the poles with the top down, and let them hang there until they got cured and dry. And in that way I could save my oats, and they dried first rate. When some of the neighbors learned about what I had done, They wondered why they had not thought of such an idea to save their oats, but after all I lost almost all anyway. The British and Indians crossed over from Canada and burned Buffalo City, and the inhabitants fled in terror. I lost all on my place. Our army was stationed at Buffalo, but fled in fear and dismay and scattered every which way. The country was all in an uproar, and you could see people, some going this way and some that, with no thought of where they might end. About all that any of us took was our wearing clothes. Some did not even do that.
I had a good span of gray mares, not over 5 years old. They were well matched and made a good team. They were smart and lively, but I had to trade them off, for I had no pasture and dare not turn them loose in the woods, for they would stray off and I would lose them. I traded one of them to my brother-in-law, Abner Currier, and got a cow and I think 25 bushels of wheat. The other I traded to a man for a yoke of 4-year-old steers and a year-old heifer. The steers had never been yoked and the heifer had never been milked, and he let me have 8 gallons of what they called in that place whiskey, but it looked more like buttermilk to me than it looked like whiskey. But I sold it for a good price, partly because of the name, and it had some spirit in it, for if a man drank of it, it would make him feel pretty lively. Well, we yoked up the steers and made a fine yoke of oxen, but I had to trade them off, for I could not work them down hauling logs, and I got for them a steady, well-broke yoke of oxen that I could drive anywhere and haul anything I wanted to. But I did not keep them long, for I had to flee the country. I came from there to Oneida County, New York, and about the 1st of January I traded my land to one Jonathan Cook for land in Oneida. After we crossed Lake Erie on a bridge a mile long, we felt more safe and wondered why we did not keep our heads and bring more things with us. We were in a sorry plight. One man in our company caught a loose mare, but it cost him so much to feed her he felt he could not afford it and wanted to sell her. I bought her for $50, and he would wait until I could find work to pay him. I wanted to go into Oneida, New York, where my brother John was. I looked about and found some old gear which I bought for a song, borrowed an axe and auger, and made a thing which I called a jumper. It carried us and our belongings, and we started out. We made a very poor show, I can tell you. I felt so ashamed jogging along that sometimes I felt mad. We got accommodations at taverns, charged free, and at the turnpike gates we got through free on our looks. The way we were rigged out told our pitiful story better than I could tell it. When we got within 5 miles of John's, I was ready to go back. They are, I suppose, well off and would be glad to help us, but see how we look. I couldn't go on. When they last saw me, I had a good span of grays, well matched, high-lived and smart, and I was otherwise well fit out, and I don't dare show up seeing how we look. They will think I have fooled away my time and squandered what I had, and now have to come back a-begging. Well, said Nancy, let's go on now and see them anyway, and we can rest a while. I am sure they would not deny us that, and whatever they think, they will have to think. We know what we have done. We can tell them the truth and make no excuses. Then if we think it best, we can go back. I guess you are right, I admitted. We will go on and pay them a visit anyway. Let them think what they will. So I took my courage, swallowed my pride, but oh, how it choked me, and went on. And oh, what a happy surprise awaited us. How different the effects from what I had imagined. They had heard that I had been drafted, and that so many hundreds had died, and feared I was among them. They did not know my wife and baby, and that made them all the more happy to have us there safe and sound, especially after we told them of the frightful conflagration we had been through. I began to get uneasy after a day or two, feeling I must get to doing something for a living. If I could only go to the store and get some leather, I could make up a lot of shoes and go back to buffalo country and sell them. I must manage some way to buy a cow, for we needed one. Milk was so high to buy by the quart. Everything was out of a poor man's reach. Wartime, and everyone soaked you for all they could get. In a few days I was ready to go peddling my wares, and I had a good-looking lot of shoes. I bought $100 worth of goods from Knox, such as calico, shawls, handkerchiefs, pins, needles, etc. Knox said if I wanted $500 worth, I was as welcome as the 100, and he asked me no security, and me a total stranger. Why not security? Because I was blood kin to the Porters he knew, and they were known to be very punctual in fulfilling their promises. Their word was their bond, and they were extremely careful to live up to it. Whatever you do, don't forfeit your word, for that means your good name. Be absolutely dependable. That was the creed taught them by their parents. Well, I got credit on their credit until I could build my own credit, which I swore would be as good as theirs anywhere in the world. I finally got off with my load and started to peddle my wares, swapping some for axes and hogs and many other commodities, anyway to accommodate the people and myself. It was a paying trip, and I settled up all the accounts I had left behind me. I also did quite a lot of work for other people, such as clearing a few acres of land, hauling logs, and the like, which helped out a lot. I bought a cow on the trip for $27.50. She was a good milker, gave a common milk bucket full twice in every 24 hours, and had money left to pay off the bills I had in Oneida. That winter I made rising of $300, and in the spring I rented land to plant crops. I was very anxious to get a home of my own, for we were paying too high rent. $1 a week was too much for one small room. I bought a small place with a log house on it. It was Indian land, and stayed there that summer. But I got good and sick of my bargain. There was no water at or near the place. We had to go nearly 1/2 mile for water for household use. A well could not be dug, at least not this side of 80 feet, which our neighbors had proved. I got mighty sick of that place, in fact plumb discouraged. There was my brother and all my kindred well off, good farms, good buildings, and plenty of everything, enough and to spare. And behold me, what was my situation? I became swearing mad beyond all description. I paced to and fro, mumbling my feelings, saying all that was on my mind, and my wife was a witness. At last I lifted my right arm up toward the starry heavens and swore to the eternal gods that I would have property of my own and a good home of my own, or I would die. I knew my credit was good and that I could get anything I wanted that people had to spare. There was plenty to spare in those parts, and I intended to have my share of it if I could get it by hard work and fair dealing and determination. In order to clear up the debts I had that year, I had to borrow $3,000 of Bena Fairbanks. I wanted him to take whatever he wanted that I had for security, but he said, "Your word is law to me, as mine is to you. That is enough." So I cleared up everything except the debt on my oxen, which I was to pay in cordwood to David Frost come winter. I called at John's that night, for I knew he was troubled about me being so much in debt, and I wanted to relieve his mind. He was in bed. His wife Huldah called to him, "Sanford's come, Sanford's come." Yes, he ran out in his shirt flaps and said, "What's up, Sanford? Are they after you?" "John," said I, "have you got any place I can hide and not be discovered?" "Oh, then they are after you." I could see I could carry the joke no further, so I said, "No, John, don't be troubled, for I owe no man a cent but Bena and Frost, which I shall pay in the season thereof." I also told him I had traded farms with Bena so we could be near them, and John was so overcome he could not know how to contain himself. He brought forth his bottles and glasses, and we made merry until morning. From then on I prospered exceedingly. I made by economy and hard work more than $1,500 in less than 3 years, besides building up my home and farm and providing for my family.
We were then called very well-to-do or well-situated, and I had robbed no man, defrauded no man, cheated no man, and stolen nothing, except one sheep, and that was my own, and I knew it was. One morning I went out in my pasture which adjoined John Hubb's place, and one of my sheep was missing, and he had one extra one. So I said to John, "You have one of my sheep among yours. I would know that sheep by its countenance anywhere. When you drive them in, I will come and get it." "Oh, no, you will not come and get it. I bought that sheep of Wells Rooney." "No, John, you did not buy that sheep of Wells Rooney." "I did, and I'll be damned if you shall have it." "Well, I think I shall be damned if I don't." Then began a tongue-lashing that is not pleasant to hear, both being hot-headed and fiery. The next morning I took some salt in a pan, went to Hubb's pasture, and got my sheep, and took it down to the house and butchered it. I looked every few minutes to see if the Hubbs were stirring, but they showed no sign until I got it all safely in and out of sight. But that was the most stealing I ever did, even though I knew the sheep was my own. He never mentioned that sheep again, nor did I. I do not know what day of the month it was, but it was in December. Early one morning I got to the barn and got some oats for my horses. I got up on the big beam to get the oats that were on the scaffold over the floor, and there was something black that rose from the floor, and went to the gable end of the barn and vanished out of my sight. It surprised me and set me to wondering what under heaven it could be. I stood and looked about the place where it disappeared, but could find no living thing there, at that end of the barn. It had the appearance of a big, long, black overcoat, with the end of the sleeves together and the elbows spread each way. It went right past me, and I had as good a chance to look at it as could be expected. But I could not tell whether it was cloth or not. I found there was no natural cause for it at all, and caused me to shudder and tremble for fear something was going to happen to some of us. But I got the oats and went off to the mill, and got my grinding done and brought my grist home with me. But I thought much of what I saw that morning and tried to contrive some natural cause, but could make out no reasonable natural cause. It was my foundation in those days that anything that was unnatural or unreasonable I would not believe. I did not believe in anything supernatural caused whatever. I called them fish stories, such as Jonah and the whale. I did not believe any of those unnatural stories. I did not know there was so much power in faith, but I have learned quite a different lesson since those days.
I think now there are not many men on earth that know by experience what power there is in faith. It was not long before we got word that Father was dead, and that he died such a day in last December, and as near as we could reason it, it was the same day or the day after that I saw that frightful sight. Father's death was a very grievous thing to all of his family, for he was very highly esteemed by his wife and children.
Sanford and Nancy were the proud parents of 13 children, 9 sons and 4 daughters.
Chauncey Warner Porter was born October 20th, 1812 at Holland, Erie County, New York, and was married December 6, 1833 at Independence, Jackson County, Missouri, to Amy Sumner. She bore him 8 children. Amy died April 6, 1847, aged 32 at Winter Quarters, now Florence, Douglas County, Nebraska, and was buried April 7th at Winter Quarters. Chauncey was married March 6, 1846 at Winter Quarters to Lydia Ann Cook. She bore him 13 children. Lydia died December 20th, 1882, age 52 at Porterville, Kane County, Utah, and was buried December 22nd in the Porterville Cemetery. Chauncey was married February 10th, 1848 at Winter Quarters to Amy Sumner. She bore him 13 children. Lydia died December 20th, 1882, age 52 at Porterville, Kane County, Utah, and was buried December 22nd in the Orderville Cemetery. Chauncey was married February 10th, 1848 at Winter Quarters to Priscilla Strong. She bore him 11 children. Priscilla died January 9th, 1895, age 64 at Orderville, and was buried January 12th in the Orderville Cemetery. Chauncey died March 3, 1868, age 55, at Centerville, Davis County, Utah, and was buried March 6 in the Porterville Cemetery.
Melinda Porter was born November 3, 1814, at Augusta, Oneida County, New York, and was married May 3, 1839, at Caldwell County, Missouri, to Ezra Alpheus Chipman. She bore him 5 children. Ezra died June 3, 1913, age 95, at Bandera County, Texas. Melinda died December 17, 1870, age 56, at Porterville, and is buried there. Sarah Porter was born September 11, 1816, at Plymouth, Oneida County, New York. She was married August 5, 1839, at Montrose, Lee County, Iowa, to David Willard. She was sealed September 6, 1852, to Edward Stevenson in Salt Lake City. Edward died January 27, 1897, age 76. Sarah died June 26, 1841, age 24, at Augusta, Lee County, Iowa. There were no children born to either of her marriages.
John President Porter was born July 28, 1818, at Plymouth, Oneida County, New York, and was married February 5, 1843, at Charleston, Lee County, Iowa, to Nancy Rich. She bore him 4 children. Nancy died December 14, 1857, aged 36, at Centerville, and was buried December 17 in Centerville. John P. was married March 27, 1853, in the Endowment House to Mary Palmer Graves. She bore him 2 children. Mary died June 18, 1896, aged 77, at Porterville, and was buried June 21 in the Porterville Cemetery. John P. died May 28, 1895, aged 76, and was buried May 30th in the Porterville Cemetery. Nathan Tanner Porter was born July 10, 1820, at Corinth, Orange County, Vermont. He was married November 12, 1848, at Salt Lake City, Salt Lake County, Utah, to Rebecca Ann Cherry. She bore him 2 children. Rebecca died December 2, 1922, aged 92, at Salt Lake City, and was buried December 5 in the Centerville City Cemetery. Nathan was married April 13, 1857, in the President's office to Eliza Ford. She bore him 11 children. Eliza died September 17, 1912, aged 71, at Centerville, and was buried September 20th in the Centerville City Cemetery. Nathan was married May 24, 1875, in the Endowment House to Elizabeth Alexander. There were no children from this marriage. Elizabeth died February 21, 1878, aged 71, at Salt Lake City. Nathan died April 9, 1897, aged 76, at Centerville, and was buried April 11th in the Centerville City Cemetery. Reuben Porter was born in May of 1822 at Augusta, Oneida County, New York, and died there the same month. Sanford Porter, Jr. was born June 25, 1823, at Vienna, Liberty Township, Trumbull County, Ohio. He was married July 25, 1852, in the President's office to Emma Ensign. She bore him 10 children. Emma died May 10, 1900, aged 67, at Farmington, Davis County, Utah, and is buried at Porterville. Sanford, Jr. was married July 25, 1852, in the President's office to Melinda Ann Porter. She was the daughter of Sanford's brother Chauncey by his first wife, Amy Sumner. She bore him 13 children. Melinda died September 22, 1886, aged 50, at Centerville, and is buried at Porterville. Sanford, Jr. was married September 4, 1889, in the Logan Temple to Virginia Anderson Kilgore. They had no children. Virginia died March 19, 1935, aged 76, at Logan, and was buried March 24th in the Logan City Cemetery. Sanford, Jr. died December 12, 1913, aged 90, at Logan, Cache County, Utah, and was buried December 15th in the Logan City Cemetery.
Nancy Areta Porter was born August 8, 1825, at Vienna Liberty Township, Trumbull County, Ohio, and was married April 7, 1845, at Nauvoo, Hancock County, Illinois, to Edward Stevenson. She bore him 5 children. Edward died January 27, 1897, at age 76 at Salt Lake City, and was buried January 31st in the Salt Lake City Cemetery. Nancy was married July 11, 1870, in the Endowment House to Ezra Thompson Clark. They had no children. Ezra died October 17, 1901, age 77, at Farmington, Davis County, Utah, and was buried October 20th at Farmington. Nancy died November 13, 1888, age 63, at Elba, Cassia County, Idaho, and was buried November 21st in the Farmington City Cemetery.
Joseph Porter was born June 2, 1827, at Vienna Liberty Township, Trumbull County, Ohio, and died the same day. Hiram Porter, a twin, was born June 2, 1827, at Vienna Liberty Township, Trumbull County, Ohio, and died the same day. Justin Theodore Porter was born May 18, 1829, 3 miles east of Pekin, Tazewell County, Illinois, and died August 18, 1841, aged 12.
Lucinda Porter was born August of 1831, 3 miles east of Pekin, Tazewell County, Illinois, and died the same month.
Lyman Wight Porter was born May 5, 1833, at Independence, Jackson County, Missouri, and was married November 5, 1852, in the President's office to Electa Mariah Kilburn. She bore him 11 children. Electa died April 24, 1917, age 81, at Porterville, and was buried April 26 at Porterville. Lyman was married March 18, 1865, in the Endowment House to Sarah Catherine Emmett. She bore him 3 children. Sarah died July 6, 1896, age 47, at Porterville, and was buried in the Porterville City Cemetery. Lyman was married October 5, 1867, in the Endowment House to Elizabeth Bailey. She bore him 9 children. Elizabeth died October 27, 1927, age 79, at Porterville, where she is buried. Lyman died March 31, 1914, age 80, at Porterville, and was buried April 3 in the Porterville City Cemetery.
As descendants of these fine and faithful people, let us remember their strong, wonderful qualities and try to live our lives to make them proud of us.